Hello and welcome to Hot Ink. My name is Rusty and I've been dyeing my hair red for about the past 7 years. And so since I know that going red is something a lot of people are interested in, I thought I'd put together this little video explaining some things that I've learned about dyeing your hair red over my many dyeing experiences. So the first thing that I learned is that in order to create a natural red look, it's really best to pick a red color that's within your same hair tone, even though it's going to be a different color. You know, when I first started dyeing my hair red, I was starting out with a really dark red dye. And it worked, and it was definitely effective at making my hair red, but it didn't look very natural. So I tried a few others, and I eventually settled on the red dye that I use now, which is a bright copper. It's much closer to sort of a blonde shade, and my natural hair color is the kind of dark blonde that Meredith Grey on Grey's Anatomy has. It comes out of my head kind of brown looking and then turns blonde further down. So that shade, because it was lighter and less aggressive, looked better on me. Another thing to remember when you're picking the color is that if you do have very light blonde hair or white or gray hairs that are starting to come in, those hairs are going to absorb a lot more of the red than the rest of your hair. So they're going to be much brighter. It's something to take into account, maybe picking a red with a little more brown in it, or not leaving the dye in as long, something like that, in order to keep you from having a fire engine red or magenta streaks through your hair. So once you've picked your shade, you kind of have to decide if you want to get your hair dyed at the salon or if you're going to be doing it yourself. I have always done it myself. I know that getting salon hair care is something that a lot of women consider, just part of their budget. I don't, I've never really had a lot of extra money to do something like that. So I've always done it myself. So for those of you going the home dyeing route, one of the most important things is understanding that it's probably going to be messy. You don't want anything in the bathroom that you can't replace or that it would bother you if it got stained, because red hair dye gets everywhere. I don't know what it is about it. Even when you're careful, it tends to get into a lot of different places, so just make sure you have old towels, that you have paper towels on hand to clean up any spills right away, just with water off the countertops and things like that. And that whatever clothes you're wearing when you dye your hair are old clothes that you don't care about. And it's best to wear shirts with a wide neckline so that when you pull them off, they don't rub all the dye off. If you can do this naked, probably one of the better times to do that. The dyeing shirt that I have is actually an old camisole top that's too small for me now, but it's got a nice wide neckline and spaghetti straps, so it's really easy to pull off over my head when my dye is all applied. When you start to dye your hair, put a little line of Vaseline around your hairline, because that'll keep you from getting dye onto your skin and having a fun little red halo around your hairline, as Colby's Hot Ink tip of the day taught us a little while back. The first time you dye your hair, follow all of the instructions on the hair dye box. Every last one of them, because they're there for a reason. They've tested it this way. It will just make your life a little easier if you don't try and fiddle with them the first time. Subsequent times, you can sort of adjust them to your own needs. What I found with my hair is that, for whatever reason, it dyes very quickly. So every box of hair dye I've ever bought has recommended leaving the dye in for 25 minutes. When I leave the dye in for 25 minutes, I end up with cartoon colored hair, no matter what the dye started out as. When I was dyeing it dark red, I ended up with magenta hair. When I started using the copper colored dye that I use now, it ended up orange, like orange, not attractive orange. So it washes out, it comes out after the first couple of times you wash it, it levels out, but those first few days are a little rough if your hair absorbs dye really easily. So since then, I've taken to leaving the dye in probably closer to 15-20 minutes, depending on how long it's been since I last dyed my hair. Your hair after dyeing will feel thinner. And I know that this was one of the reasons I stopped using a darker dye. I had to keep up with the darker dye like every 6 to 8 weeks, almost on the dot, in order for it to stay bright. And it made my hair feel completely, dead and destroyed. My hair looks kind of dead and destroyed now, but that's because it's winter, not because of the hair dye. And usually when I'm rinsing in the shower and I'm running my fingers through my hair, I have a lot more loose strands of hair come out than I do when I normally shampoo and conditioner, and it can be a little nerve-wracking, but so far I haven't gone bald. And that's why they always recommend when you're buying commercial hair dye to do a patch test, like on a small bit of hair, because you'd want to know if all your hair was going to fall out before you did your whole head. So if you've got sensitive skin, if you've got a scalp that reacts badly to styling products, that's definitely something to keep in mind. Now, if you don't like commercial hair dye and you still want to dye your hair red, you can always use henna. And I have used henna on my hair sometimes. I bought the henna from Lush. And the way you use that henna is it comes in a brick, and you grind it up and make it into a paste, and then apply the paste to your hair, wrap it up, and leave it sit for a long time. Henna, because it doesn't have chemicals, is a much more slow-acting dye, and it's like dyeing something with tea. You kind of have to leave it in the liquid. The longer you leave it in, the darker it's going to be. With henna, you have to block out a long period of time that you can leave it in your hair, and leave your head wrapped in saran wrap, because that helps trap the chemicals in, keeps them from drying out also, so it dyes your hair better. You should also always mix the henna with hot water, because that'll help bring out the pigment more. And what I like to do to help it spread a little more easily and come out a little more easily later was add just like a little bit of olive oil into the mix, because it made it smooth down over all of my hair a little more easily. As for how long to leave it in, that's kind of up to you. Because my hair takes color very easily, I never had to leave it in more than an hour, hour and a half or so. Some people swear by wrapping your head up super tight and sleeping in it, and waking up the next morning and rinsing it out. So that's up to you to decide. What is universal, whether you're using henna or commercial dye, is that when you rinse your hair out, it is going to look like Psycho in your shower. Red hair dye looks almost uncannily like blood when you rinse it out of your hair, and it's a little strange the first couple of times, and then you get used to it, and just stick with it. Keep rinsing through until the water runs clear. This is a great time to shave your legs, because that always takes way too long for me in most of my regular showers. So just plan that you're going to be taking a longer shower than you're used to in order to rinse all the dye out, but you want to rinse all the dye out, because otherwise anything your head touches for the next day is going to get red hair dye on it. So those are my tips for going red. I have been successfully red for a few years now. Most people would never know that this is not my natural hair color, or that I've been dyeing it myself, but it took me a lot of practice and trial and error to get there. So don't give up. If you absolutely hate red hair, you might want to figure that out before you dye it, because I can tell you it is a bitch to cover. So I hope this helps, and happy dyeing!